Musically meditated.
Musically meditated. Musically meditated.
All right, welcome to Musically Meditated Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Riley. I have my co-host and badass producer, Sretton Jovanovic. What's up?
What's up?
How you doing? Are you flexing?
A little bit.
He just got out of the gym, so he's feeling a little swole.
Little bit swollen. It's hard to sit in this chair with all my muscle in my legs.
All that swole, all
That's right.
all that yoked up. You're looking yoked up over there. Yep. But first thing, go back and check out last episode. It was really cool. Sretton, you did a great job with putting everybody together.
Thanks, man.
That was really cool. It was a little shout out. End of the year shout out to all of our guests and all of our listeners. So thanks again. If you missed that episode, go back. This is episode 60, right?
Sure is.
And I know we've talked about this particular band or these particular artists a few times, and that is Pantera. I feel bad that, it took this long to do a Pantera episode because they are a huge influence on me musically, especially, childhood, like you were saying, more childhood, teenage years, but
right.
Definitely going to focus more on Dimebag and Vinny. Unfortunately, Vinny passed away this summer. He was their drummer. He was also in Hell Yeah and Damage Plan and that other thing him and Dimebag had with David Allan Coe, Rebel Yes or something, Rebel on Rebel or something like that. But Vinny kind of kept the torch going in Dimebag's legacy. He always put shine on his brother's name and never forgot about him, and you could tell it really affected him. But unfortunately, they're both not here anymore, so I think I'll focus a little bit more on Dimebag because I know a little bit more about him, but we'll definitely throw Vinny in there too, or maybe give Vinny his own episode. But two huge heavy metal heavy hitters couldn't really have heavy metal where it's at today if it wasn't for the Pantera boys, Dimebag and Vinny, that is. Now, they're both brothers, and Sretton, like I said, when I was a kid, I was really into Pantera. They grabbed my attention, maybe even more so in my teenage years. But how about you? You said you were a kid too, ain't it?
Yeah, I was saying it earlier. The way I got into them was through. So back in the day, I would read comics and magazines, a lot of kung fu magazines and stuff, and they always had advertisements for BMG. Like there's Columbia House and BMG, and they would do like, you get 12 cassettes for a penny or something like that, and then you pay like some stupid amount for shipping and handling. And I didn't know a lot about music, so I would just pick out things, and it was very random. That's how I got into Wu-Tang. That's how I got into Pantera, White Zombie. That's how I got into Lil' Kim.
Lil' Kim?
Yeah, that's how I got into all that stuff. That's how my friend was really into Tupac, but that's how I discovered Tupac and all those people. I didn't have a musical mentor. I didn't have somebody that was like, hey, kid, you got to listen to this. My musical mentor was high-price shipping and handling tapes.
Right on.
And so I would just get a bunch of stuff. And I just got lucky that a lot of it was really good, and one of them was Pantera. What hooked me first was, like I said, I had a friend that was into Metallica. I liked Metallica, but I didn't like Metallica the way that other people were nuts about Metallica. So, but it was he planted the seed so that I would go explore. And that's where I found White Zombie, and then randomly I found Pantera, and it was the cover with the dude getting punched in the face.
Vulgar.
And I started listening to it, and just the sound of it was just, back then I didn't, even now I'm not crazy about subtle music. I want music that's going to punch me in the face. That I want music that's going to be very intense. I do enough exploring and chilling and trying to meditate and relax in my life. A lot of times when I listen to music, I want high energy music because, given what we both do, we both work, we both, run businesses, we both are trying to do this stuff. And there's a lot of times when I don't have the energy, and I need some music that's going to just get me going, get my blood boiling, and get me real pumped. And that's what Pantera did for me. So, yeah, that album, there was nothing else I listened to after I found that. And then I went back because that wasn't their first album. That was their second album. Yeah. So I went back and listened to the first one. And then
Cowboys from Hell and started revisiting.
I just loved the sound. It was so loud and fast. And then when it slowed down, it was like imagine the Hulk growing in slow motion. Yeah. It was like that buildup, like, and then I loved it.
It's great gym jams, like what's your gym jam?
Yeah.
I think Pantera is always a great go-to.
You won't hear me say gym jams out loud except for that one time.
Gym jams? What, you did say it before?
No, just that one time.
Just that, right? You're never going to do it again? Hashtag gym jams. But at any rate, for me, the first time it's weird that you said Vulgar because Vulgar Display of Power was my first encounter with Pantera, but ironically, it had to deal with my father, and he didn't really even listen to him, but he always liked to get gifts for people that were not the right gifts to give to people, especially kids. So he was like the first dude that would buy, someone a Red Ryder pellet, like a BB gun or whatever. So there was a place called the CD Trading Post off of Route 30 that always had cool T-shirts and rock and roll memorabilia, like a head shop or whatever. And he bought Vulgar Display of Power T-shirt with the guy getting punched in the face for my cousin Ian for Christmas.
Shout out to Ian.
Shout out to Ian. So we were probably like 9 or 10 years old. So, that's not really, I don't know. It is what it is. I'm not judging you, Dad, but that's
My
a
pops
really
is the same way.
That's a cool gift.
Yeah, we'd go like I think I had you remember in the 80s I think a big phrase with T-shirts like at Spencer's and stuff with shit happens.
Yeah.
And I had a couple shit happens shirts and just that like what was it? That just there were those shirts that were filthy. My dad's like, "Why don't you get this? It's funny." I'm like, "Dad, I can't have a shirt with like lady with giant boobs on it."
Yeah.
Like, I got to go to school. He's like, "It's funny though."
Some dad humor.
Yeah.
Some dad jokes. But yeah, so he purchased that. I remember my cousin Ian opening it like, "Whoa, this is awesome." And some parents were probably like, "Eh," but at any rate, after that, Ian is still in this picture. He was always like the cool cousin that was getting like CDs before a lot of us were, and like really cool CDs. And Far Beyond Driven was one of them that he had. So I remember it was this one particular like summer. You'd get more time to hang out and spend the night during the summer. And I think I borrowed or accidentally borrowed, however you want to put that. Far Beyond Driven. Yeah, like Far Beyond Driven was in there, and I think it was Nirvana, the acoustic stuff. Remember the acoustic stuff that was on MTV?
Right. Yeah.
So I was probably like 10 or 11. Yeah, Unplugged. Yeah. Thank you. And he eventually got it back. Like, hey, where are my CDs at? So he swiped it back, but that
he eventually got them back in 2014.
Yeah, I just remember it was like one particular summer I was listening to Tupac, Against All Odds, and Pantera. What did I say? What album this was? Far Beyond Driven.
Yeah.
So that's a really crazy dynamic.
You know what though?
There.
Those years I mean, nowadays, what's cool is nowadays there's a lot of that too, just because of all our access to all the music. But back then, music wasn't so accessible. But the stuff that was popular, if you were a kid with an open mind to music, yeah, you could do Tupac and Pantera in the same sitting. Like you could do that.
It
was awesome.
It's awesome. It's pretty heavy too. I think it was like 11 years old. Like looking back, like that's pretty intense for an 11-year-old. But
yeah,
hey,
that's true.
Whatever. I'm fine.
I was like 16.
I ended up okay. At least I think I did. But
mostly.
Well, at least I think. But I don't know. Y'all could slide into my DMs and let me know how you really
or send an email at musicallymeditated@gmail.com.
Thank you. But I remember that, and I remember that album cover, and I kind of remember maybe a few videos on MTV and so on and so forth. But then it was like how you were saying, like you could listen to different genres, but I remember I've talked about this before. You couldn't really like pick just one genre with the group of people you're like hanging out with. So there's this foggy time, like I had to be like a hip hop head with my hip hop friends. Couldn't really hang out with the heavy metal dudes, so I kind of cut it all off. But Metallica got my interest again, like freshman year of high school, and I started to listen to heavier stuff. And then I remember somebody was wearing a Pantera Great Southern Trendkill t-shirt, and it has that snake. I was like, man, I got to check that out. And I heard a lot of people like, oh, it's awesome, and it's killing the trends, like the whole trend of hip hop with metal. And I think they were out to kill that or any like punk rock influence. Like Pantera was definitely one of those bands that, they wore their emotions, like Phil was kind of an abrasive guy. He wore his emotions on his sleeve. Like they didn't care what anybody thought. Like they were abrasive like band, and
right.
I just remember that t-shirt. I'm like, that's cool. So following the next year, I started playing sports, and you find like weird musical influences in all kinds of places. But I remember playing football, and in football, like I was younger, but the upperclassmen would always listen to music before practice, and there was just a wide variety of different tunes being played, and Pantera was definitely one of them. And the album was 101 proof. And I'm not like a really big dude that's like into live albums all the time, but that particular album like really got my attention. And this is when like everybody had a sound system and 12-inch speakers and bumps, and you'd put that in.
The music was perfect.
And it was perfect. Like that album, it started with New Level, and then it went right into Walk. And like if you had a decent sound system and you turn that up, like
so good.
Everybody's looking at you.
Yeah.
So that was just my, I don't know, just little little backstory with Pantera there. And then to end it, I did get to see them at Ozfest 2000. I know I've talked about that before on the show too.
Right.
But I'm happy I was able to see that, and it was kind of more. That was like reinventing the Steel days, and that was their last album. And I'm not the biggest fan. I think a lot of people aren't a huge fan of that. I think it was more Pantera by the numbers. I know that there was a lot of problems with the band, internally. Like Phil was having a massive drug problem, and he wasn't seeing eye to eye with Vinny and Dime. And I think Rex, the bass player, just kind of like went with the flow. But then Phil was jumping off and doing more like his own stuff, like working with Down and Superjoint Ritual and so on and so forth. But you could tell that there was a tension, and the live performance was awesome. Like they were the main headliner, and what I really remember about that particular show was people moshing. Like it was at the World, but people were moshing on like the bowl part. Like how it has like the land is kind of at an incline.
That area where you physically shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, where you physically shouldn't be able to, and using your brain, you probably just shouldn't do that.
Right.
Because you could have like a dude that's like 300 pounds getting that perfect angle on you downhill, mind you, it just flattening you. And what was really crazy was like there were like 3 different pits. There was like a huge circle pit in the middle, and then there would be like one on the left and then the right hand side. I was like, wow, like that's intense. Like I'm not getting involved in that. I remember telling myself that. Like I felt at the time I had like my cuts and bruises and my mosh pit. I don't know, just bones about me. But no, I stayed out of that one.
Not that day.
Did you ever get to see Pantera live?
No, I didn't do concert stuff.
Okay.
I was, I did. I think I went to my first concert. I'm trying to think. It was late. I think I was like 18 or 19.
Okay.
I'm not even sure.
Okay.
But no, I was lucky in 2 ways. I was never part of any kind of clique in middle school or high school or even college. I played soccer, and like I said, I all my friends, I was lucky enough, everybody that I hung out with, including my parents, they would just let me listen to whatever it was. I remember listening to filthy like NWA and all this other stuff in the van while we were taking family trips because they just didn't care.
Right.
They didn't care what was playing. They weren't listening to it. They would talk to each other up front. We'd be, listening. I remember listening to Ice Cube. No, I'm sorry, Dr. Dre's Chronic.
Okay.
And we talked about this. I'm not a fan. I don't like Chronic. I did not like that album. That's a topic for another day.
Okay.
But yeah, we would listen to like Pantera on these family trips. When I hung out with my friends, it was really what I wanted to listen to. I was lucky. I don't know. I wasn't the boss of anybody. I just hung out with people that didn't care. In high school, soccer, there were the upperclassmen that would listen to stuff to get pumped up. I'd have my White Zombie and Pantera. I'd have my tapes and my Walkman and stuff, listen on the bus. The upperclassmen would listen to Offspring and Nine Inch Nails. More Offspring. Not to knock Offspring, that the one album that they
Smash.
Yeah.
First one.
They were like every song was pretty good.
Yeah.
And it was fast. Everything was fast. I thought
Had
it
the
was
skeleton on it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. Just wasn't for me. Like I would listen in. Everybody else did. So would I. But then I would go back to my. And when I say White Zombie, it was the first album. I liked one of my favorite intros of a song is on the second album, but I didn't like the second album. But I was just Pantera all the way. And now it's 20-something years later, and occasionally I'll go back to 1 or 2 songs just to get pumped up, but I don't really go back to it.
Okay.
Just because there's so much other stuff.
Right. I do go back to them more so than any of the other 90s or 80s heavy metal bands.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to say like Pantera doesn't like they don't get the credit that they deserve, but they were like the perfect blend in between like Metallica and Slayer. Metallica and Slayer were 80s, like mid 80s thrash.
Yeah.
Slayer, they both had their cult following. Slayer went more like death metal and more dark, and Metallica, they just did their thrashy thing, but everybody knows who they are, right?
Right.
And Pantera was the perfect thing in between that. You know what I'm trying to say? Like they were the perfect heavy metal band right in between because they had like the showmanship, especially with their earlier stuff. I mean, they were doing stuff like 80s hair metal too. Like people forget that, or people just want to purposely forget it. But
they did do 80s hair metal?
Yeah. Right. There's like Diamond, I think his name was Diamond Dallas, like that was Dimebag's first nickname. And like there's funny YouTube clips like they have the perm, like Phil's wearing Spanx and shit. Like I was there.
How did those guys, all those bands, get away with that back then?
It was
like
just
it was okay to wear Spanx and super tight like stretchy pants,
eyeliner. I mean, they're wearing it all.
Yeah,
Eyeliner, all that jazz,
Yep.
man. But I don't know. I think it was just the thing.
was the thing.
It was the thing. I mean, we had new metal or pimpcore. There was a thing. I don't know if there's ever going to be a thing for rock and roll again, but we'll just have to wait and see. But, uh, yeah, dude, like back to the heavy metal thing. Like I was saying, the comparison. They were the perfect thing in between for Metallica and Slayer. I felt, and like other metal bands too that were perfect for the in between were like Sepultura. I don't think that they really get the props that they should. Megadeth, obviously too, but Pantera specifically, like I go back and I revisit, like you said, like Jim Jams. Like if I would have,
I wish you would stop saying that.
if you really want to do some extra reps or hit a punching
Yeah.
bag, like Pantera is always a good one
It
to
is.
go to.
It is.
You know,
And it's funny, like I think Megadeth came out. Megadeth started to get old when I got into them. I guess they were already in the game for a few years, right?
like Dave Mustaine was already like through rehab, thinking about it and shit.
Yeah,
Like,
and Pantera came to me right when I'd say that all the time, like right when I needed it, not when I needed it, just when I was like that's when I was really exploring music. I started listening to Pantera, and but I'm not the music expert. You are. Like
no,
I
don't
just
call me the music expert, but
well, it's something that I was, it was a big influence as far as like energy and like what I enjoyed back then. And I tried to tell everybody like you got to listen to this, you got to listen to this, and some people listened, some people didn't. So
okay. But yeah,
you don't
man.
hear Boyan talking about Pantera.
No, what happened, Boyan?
He's never been a
A
big
heavy guy.
like heavy stuff. There's a few songs like hip hop songs that are fast or heavy or high energy that he really enjoys, but never. He's not going to do Pantera.
Well, to focus a little bit here more on Dimebag.
Yeah.
Daryl Abbott is his actual name, but like especially his personality. Now I
He had
know.
his birthday. Was it like 2 months ago? Because we're at the tail end of the year, right?
Well, I know he was murdered on December 8th.
Oh, okay.
So
that's what you wanted. Right,
yeah,
right.
I wanted to do something for Dime here, and then obviously throw Vinny because he passed away, but we've been doing other things,
Right.
like with other ideas and
Right,
so on
right,
and so
right.
forth. So I wanted to get this one in. But as far as Dimebag's personality goes, you could really see who he was and how fun he was as a person. Because like I guess he aspired to be like a film director, or like a BMX dude, and then like a director. Like he was really into film.
Right.
And where you could really get a good glimpse of Dime's personality are the Pantera home videos. So when they would tour, there's Vulgar Display of Power, and then they're the home videos. It's Vulgar Display of Power, like when they were touring, and then Pantera 3. And like you could throw these back into my stories of growing up with Pantera too, but like it was the VHS days, and like you were a cool dude if you had this particular VHS tape because they would just joke around all the time. Like Dimebag was the type of dude that would enter the room, so they say, or you could tell on these videos, have a smile on his face, put a smile on everybody else's face, and just not take anything too
Right.
seriously. He was just always there to have a good time.
That makes me think. So why didn't? So they should have an even more. They should be given even more credit because that's them giving access to themselves, and that's something that you didn't get back then. You got like some MTV access, like you got Cribs, or you got some like quick concert interviews after something that MTV mostly did. There was no YouTube, there was no Vimeo, there was nothing like that to give you access. Nowadays, you got Twitter and everything that you get almost too much access to artists. Or if you don't, people are like, "Well, is that guy a jerk, or is that person or that band, are they jerks?" But that's crazy because like
They're
that's
ahead of their
something you didn't
time.
get. Yeah, that's
they're
something
ahead
you
of
didn't
time.
get.
Yeah. That's a good point.
The
dude.
VHS tapes.
VHS tapes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, you could tell that they were edited and they just had a VHS camera
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they would just do funny shit with like firecrackers and fireworks and that drinking related things, drug related things, like but you could tell they always partied and had a good time.
I wonder if you could find those on YouTube.
Oh, it's all on YouTube.
Yeah.
I still have the VHS tape
Yeah?
somewhere. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, somewhere. Might have to put that on eBay, but probably not.
yeah, yeah.
Probably not. But
Keep those.
yeah, I think I have Pantera 3, the DVD, and then the Vulgar Display of Power one, and that one's the better out of the two. But yeah, they're still available. Everything's on YouTube for the most
Right.
part. I mean, unless if they take it down. But you never watched any of those?
No.
Oh yeah, they were fun, man. Like
Right.
I remember it even inspired some of us. Like when we were in high school, my one friend Mike Simmons, shout out to Mike really quick. It kind of inspired him to do that too. Like, and he did. Like he would just. I'm sure he has some of those tapes. We talked about it before, but just being silly teenagers, doing pranks and
Right.
kind of partying and just being crazy, and he would edit them and take the time. And there was a lot of cool footage, man. A lot of cool footage. But yeah, you could really tell that Dimebag was that guy, so to speak. Just the life of the party, never took anything too seriously. Walked in, everybody loved him. He was just fun. You could
Awesome
just tell.
front man.
Just an awesome lead man because he didn't
Yeah.
sing. But yeah,
That's what I mean.
yeah, you could tell, and like they had like a good personality. And then Vinny, I always got the impression from Vinny, he was the older brother looking out, but he was on and like looking out, but he had a lot of fun too. He didn't take himself entirely too seriously, but you could tell like Dime was maybe the younger brother that would joke around and do this and that, and maybe Vinny was kind of the one keeping him in check, or you know what I'm saying, just big brother
Right.
vibes.
Right.
But yeah, for everyone listening, you probably remember those tapes, especially if you're a Pantera fan. I mean, it doesn't get any better, and I like how you brought that up, man. Ahead of their time. This is before YouTube and all of that, to show that side of the band
Yeah.
to just
Yeah.
hanging out and having fun.
And to be charming, to
yeah.
show it and actually like be somebody that's like, oh, I want to hang out with that dude. I like this band even more. What I did, another contrast was a big contrast between like you and I, as far as like some of the ways we intake our music. Back then, also, I didn't like nowadays when I get turned on to a new band or I see something. It's probably because of YouTube and Google. I want to learn everything I can about the members of the band, who plays this, who plays that. Back then, if I liked something in Pantera, if his nickname wasn't Dimebag Daryl, I probably would not have known who he was at all because I didn't really do band research. I just really liked the band, and if I liked something, I just wanted to repeatedly listen to that music. I didn't care where that person grew up. I didn't really care, who his people were. Like I just was really obsessed with the music itself, even though it doesn't make sense. Like you should be looking at lyric sheets. You should be looking at, like where they came from. And
there's obsessive fans, and then there's not. You know,
yeah.
like someone could just, all right, I like this jam. I like this tune.
I just like putting the jams on repeat. And
I'm a little bit more obsessive with it.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously. But like you said, the sound, like moving on to the sound of Pantera that caught your attention, it's definitely Dimebag's guitar tone.
Yeah.
It's a sound.
Yeah.
And he credited this to Texas style. And the best way I could describe Texas style is not necessarily following any rules on how to approach a guitar, because his dad always said to follow the rules, and Dime said that was the worst advice he ever got in his life. But Texas style is kind of a good mixture of letting the instrument speak for you, like not so structured and just be fluid, but more of a Southern style. Like you could tell that, he was influenced by Stevie Ray Vaughan, some blues, some of that Southern flavor, or ZZ Top. Like Southern style was kind of bending the notes and just let it fluidly, like coming, like he was really into that. Like I said, like not so much of a structure or here's the chord, here's the tab, here's the progression, but just kind of just going with the flow. And Dime's freaking guitar sound, like there's none other like it. Each record kind of has its own vibe or its own tone, but Great Southern Trendkill, that's just piercing, razor sharp, vulgar display of power too. There's something about that guitar tone that could never be duplicated.
Yeah.
Like he like really combined the mid and the high gain perfectly, but still able to crunch it. And he wasn't obviously scared to use the whammy bar, because the whammy bar kind of turned into something that was just like a total showboat thing, like with the 80s hair metal. But Dime was able to use it like to his advantage and do crazy squeals and just like some mind altering, I don't know, man, just tones and some shifts. Like some of his, to the listener, you'll have to mention like your favorite Dimebag solo. I'm going to finish this episode with my personal favorite Dimebag solo, but man, it's just by the numbers. Dime was just the shit.
Yes, he was.
He was just the shit, man. And his guitar tone is one of a kind. One of a kind. Moving on to like the Pantera breakup. This was, like I said, reinventing the steel. I believe that was, you had Cowboys from Hell, Vulgar, Far Beyond, Great Southern Trendkill. So it was their 5th studio release. And I think that came out in 2003. And it was just an awkward time. They just weren't necessarily clicking. Like I mentioned, like Phil was having his substance abuse problems.
Yeah.
Diamond Vinny weren't seeing eye to eye like with him. He was checking out different bands, trying new things. Phil was, and then Phil was saying some nasty shit about him in the press, and it was just weird, just a weird time. And I like the song "Revolution" is my middle name, and "Yesterday Don't Mean Shit." There's like some decent bangers, but you can kind of tell like Pantera wasn't taking a step back, but not necessarily a step forward. That's just my personal opinion. Now, Some
Yeah.
people may love it. I don't know, but do you remember that album or no?
No, I don't
Okay.
remember that one.
And that's when I got to see them. Whatchamacallit, at Ozfest. I mean, it was right before that, but I know they were playing some of those tunes. You know, like
Did you say that was 2000? What year?
2000.
2000. Okay.
I think Reinventing the Steel came out in 03, but I know that they were playing a couple of those tracks, and this was like an era like I just remember like Phil having like the longer hair, the big beard, you know, like you could tell like he would just scream a lot more on stage instead of trying to I don't know, sing necessarily, because he could sing his ass off too, but you could tell there was just a little bit of distance in the band, and
Yeah.
by this time they were just like a household name for heavy metal almost. And this is when they broke up after this album. There was the problems, and Phil went and he started down like in between like Pantera's mid career, but he went back with Rex and started down, which is like a really cool kind of like a southern bluesy, I don't know, doomy kind of outfit, you know. And he got a bunch of his buddies, and everybody loves Down for the most part. Like you can't deny them; they were great. And he also did Superjoint Ritual, which was awesome because they blended a little bit more punk in there. You know, Phil was showing some more of his punk side, and then Vinny and Dime started. The hell were they? Damage Plan, and I just didn't. It just really didn't ring.
Right.
You know, it just didn't really resonate with me like at all. Like I just.
What was it like? It was just not.
Like I know that the way I looked at it at the time, and no disrespect to them, if anyone's listening, you know, that really loves Damage Plan, or you know, like, or even like Vinny and Dime's family, you know. Sorry, Strat, if you really like Damage Plan, but
I'm just waiting to hear what you're about to say.
It just sucked, man. It just sucked.
Yeah, yeah.
It just was kind of like rehashed shit. Like I guess Dimebag was saying like he felt a little bit more free to kind of put some more of his southern influences in there, and not everything had to be heavy, heavy, heavy. So that's cool. Like if he had that outlet to do that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and it sucks that Pantera broke up because Damage Plan was the band that he was touring with when he got murdered on stage. You know, so you can't blame them necessarily, but there was no reason why Diamond Vinny should have been playing, you know, these bullshit clubs or whatever. Like not bullshit, but you know what I'm saying, like a place that has 250 and 300 people in it, when, you know, if it was Pantera, they could have, I don't know, you know, 10,000 in an arena or something, you know. So it was like they were taking a step back, but you got to love them and respect them for wanting to get out there and jam.
Yeah.
They weren't just going to say, all right, we're done now because Phil's an asshole, we don't like him, and he wants to do his own solo stuff, you know. So they still went out there. And what's really weird about this like time period, I was more on Phil's side. It was weird. Like everybody, it was kind of like a divorce, you know, like when Pantera broke up, like you had to like pick a side almost. Like, are you with Diamond Vinny or are you with Phil? Like it was so stupid, but it was true.
Yeah,
like
even as a fan, you had to pick
even
sides.
as a fan, like it was in the magazines, and you know, Phil was trashing Diamond and Vinny, like to a certain extent. I mean, I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but it was getting pretty ugly. So I kind of went more with Phil just because I liked what he was putting out. Like I said, Down was the shit. Everybody liked Down, and like Superjoint Ritual came out of nowhere. And then like Phil was dipping his toes into like death and black metal, and now he has his own record label and so on and so forth. So Phil's successful, but you know, the thing I didn't like about Phil was like his dope head shit. You know, but you can't really blame him. You can't blame him for that, but I'm not going to look down upon the guy because he had some drug problems, you know. But it was just a rough time. But I was working with this guy, and Damage Plan was on tour, and he was like, "Hey, they're coming in Chicago. I don't remember the venue." He's like, "Would you want to go?" I'm like, He's like, "I got to work in the morning." He's like, "Yeah, so do I." He's like, "We can go after." And I was like, "No, I thanks, but no thanks," kind of thing. So I saw him the next day, and I'm like, "How was he?" He's like, "Oh, it was awesome." He's like, Dime poured a shot of whiskey, like, and it fell in my eye. I was like right there. And then he gave me some, you know, like he poured some Jack in my mouth. I'm like, "Awesome, dude." He's like, "Yeah, it was great." I'm like, "Shit, you know, that sounds pretty cool." Well, he got murdered in Columbus, so Columbus is pretty close to Chicago, right? Close enough. So, I mean, it was literally within days he was murdered.
Man.
Yeah, it was really, really sad. So I remember the dude's Joe, a guy I worked with, and I saw Joe, and I was like, "Dude, did you hear?" And like, you know, the internet was around in 2004, but you weren't able to get your information like you are today. You know, not everybody had a cell phone, and you know how it was.
Yeah.
That '04 blues. But you know, Joe pulled me to the side, and he's just like, "Yeah, man, did you hear what happened?" And like I kind of did, and you know, I'm still in shock about it because I had a I was in a band around that time too. Shout out to Johnny K, Johnny Kalinowski, and he was a guitarist in my group. And I think we had just broken up, like our band, but he came over, and it was like the first time I moved out on my own.
Mhm.
And Johnny came over, and like he told me, and like we were both like, it's weird because if you don't know the person, it's hard, you know what I'm saying, to actually like feel it or grieve.
Right.
I don't know how to
Right.
describe it, but this he's my favorite guitarist of all time, childhood guitarist, and Johnny came over and told me, and we were both just blown away, just blown away. So another thing too with Dimebag's death, if anyone wants to know more about that, there's a book called A Vulgar Display of Power, and it really puts, it lays down the blueprint. And I remember too, um, after this, remember Behind the Music? There was a really good Behind the Music on
Mhm.
VH1 about
Yeah.
Pantera. But at any rate, it was December 8th, 2004, and they were at a large nightclub in Columbus, Ohio, and there was only like 250 people there, and it was really messed up. The tours, who else was on tour? Was Shadows Fall and The Haunted, and this I don't want to mention this dude's name because he doesn't matter, the killer, but like I said, man, it was a weird time as far as the band breaking up, and you have such a dedicated fan base, right? And people were picking sides. So this piece of shit, he he took Phil's side. Not saying that Phil's a piece of shit, but the killer took Phil's side,
Right.
and in his warped, deranged mind, blamed the breakup of Pantera on Dimebag. And here's something too, like with I don't know, like the right amount of press or whatever. I never felt like Dime got the right amount of press with this. Like this should have been I mean, I don't know. I don't remember if it was
Like
national
more
news.
dedication
More
stuff.
dedication. Yeah, more
This is the
dedication. But
influence this guy had.
yeah,
This
but
is tragic.
this is tragic.
Yeah.
Like this is awful, right? Because this was like my early 20s, and two really tragic events like that took place with violence was obviously 9/11. I remember that really grabbing my attention, and
Mhm.
this because could you imagine? This is the story. I mean, Dime was on stage, and this guy just rushed up on stage with a gun and shot him in cold blood and killed him. And he killed like 5 other people. He killed the guitar tech. He killed people in the crowd. And Vinny, his brother, the drummer, he witnessed all this because he was the drummer for Damage Plan too.
Right.
So just imagine, like for a second, because like the metal world forever has been changed or anything. Like it's as terrible as like school shootings and shit. Like there's no safe zones, man.
Right.
Like just imagine that. It's so terrifying. Like you're
Yeah.
on stage. Imagine what was Dime thinking?
Well,
like, oh my
yeah.
God, it's just so.
That,
I don't mean
you're
to be
right,
such
though.
a buzzkill,
Like
but
having a concert like that, it is one of the social safe zones we have is the concert. It's access to, it's the ultimate access creatively for the people that are playing. Like you're there on stage, you're listening to them play on stage. You can get close, you're far away, but these people that you are fans of are right there. Um, and then you should expect that this is a place where it's set up for you just to enjoy. If you want drinks, you got drinks. Sometimes if you want food, you got food. Usually go with your friends or loved ones. Like you're going to listen to this, and then something like that happens. It just yeah.
we
It's
can't.
traumatic. It's tragic.
traumatic.
It's nonsense. It's garbage.
Yeah, we can't live in fear, but man, like that's a very vulnerable spot. Like it's unheard of, and I guess I kind of remember like the press was trying to do that bullshit where they link like heavy aggressive music with heavy and aggressive violence, and but like kind of that. I remember that, and that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it shouldn't be, I don't know, viewed upon or looked upon that way just because of the style of music. But
Right.
here's some other facts too. There was a total of 15 shots, and 3 other people were killed and 7 were wounded. And when this happened, like the footage is still available. Like not when anybody was killed, but when he rushed on stage. So if you want to go on YouTube and watch it, it's available. So the killer, his backstory, all I know is he was ex-military and he was a big guy. He was like 6'6", 300 pounds, not a small dude. So when he rushed on stage, he came from like the back, so to speak, and he came out on stage and people thought it was a part of the act. They didn't know,
Mhm.
when shots were starting to go off, but it wasn't. Yeah, dude, it's just it's still like a really really hard one. I'm not trying to be a buzzkill, but it's a part of Dime's.
It's part of the history.
It's part of the
what you're talking
history.
about,
Yeah. And another way to look at it too, like he was such an awesome dude, and I guess there's no other way he'd want to go. I mean, it's so damn tragic, but I guess I'm trying to like spin a positive. I don't know. It's just really awful. And the first responding officer showed up with a 12 gauge and a shotgun, and a shotgun shoots, it could shoot a slug, which is one piece, so to speak, or it could shoot a buckshot, which is a bunch of pellets in a grouping, right?
Mhm.
So the first responding officer got there, and he just let off one particular round of the buckshot at the guy. Like the guy had a hostage. It was like some crazy movie shit, like seriously. And he just released one of the buckshots, and one of the pellets from the grouping of the buckshot hit the guy right in the middle and between
Really?
his eyes and killed him.
Wow.
Yeah, dude, really crazy. Now here's another backup story about this, which is what really, really pisses me off. And I learned this in that book, A Vulgar Display of Power. Uh, this wasn't the first time the killer tried to do this to Dime. There was an onstage altercation 6 months prior to this at a Damage Plan concert in Cincinnati. And the killer, damaged $5,000 worth of equipment, and he had to be rushed and thrown the hell off the stage. I think he tried to sneak through like the back part, like where the van would come up.
Yeah.
Like the tour bus or whatever you want to call it. And he tried to sneak through there, but they caught on to him. And like I said, he was a big boy, so they beat him, and they didn't call the cops. They just beat him up, you know what I mean? Like threw him off the back deck, so to speak. And, here you go. You wait 6 months later, and here comes this psychopath, and just ruin a lot of stuff. So yeah, it was a very tragic event. And I mean, I remember where I was, like I said, like 9/11 almost, but I was a huge Pantera fan. And like I said, I feel that, all the heavy metal people know about it, but I want more of your everyday person should know about this tragic story, because he was really that awesome of a person. Like I said, with his personality, you could tell watching the old videos or just seeing him on stage.
Yeah.
Truly influential guitarist, one of the best. And, back to that Texas style that he had, I felt like he was a great blend in between like Eddie Van Halen and who was Ozzy's guitarist? Damn it, I'm getting a blank. Not Zach Wild, Randy Rhoads. Sorry, guitarist nerds. But yeah, he was a great blend between Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads. And then he kind of had like the stage presence of like an Ace Frehley from Kiss. Like he was those three things perfectly. But then he was able to bring in the sounds and the influences of the South, so to speak, with country rock, with the blues and the passion behind blues and the sorrow and the blues, so to speak, like Stevie Ray Vaughan. So he was like a great influence and a great combination of all those different elements, and that was Dimebag. But then to combine it with an awesome personality, like it's very rare. And it's just obviously very unfortunate that he's not here. Like when I got to see him at 2000 Ozfest and talk to me 18 years later here in December, right, of 2018, and if you would have told me like Diamond Vinny would have been gone and that would have been Pantera's last album, Reinventing the Steel, I'd be like, get out of here. Like I thought they were just going to be around forever, because they're like your childhood idols, and you look up to them so much. And just for some bullshit tragic stuff like this to happen, it's just really unfortunate. And back to Vinny now, the drummer, his brother, he had to move on with this, right? So I know that he did not see eye to eye with Phil from Pantera at all. He didn't even let Phil show up. Phil show up to the funeral.
Really?
He was asked not to show up.
Yeah.
And Vinny moved on. He started what was that band? Hell Yeah, which is another type of metal act I didn't really care for. It was like a super group, with some of the dudes from Mudvayne, and they weren't bad, but it just wasn't my jam. Not for me. But he continued to push along and move on after witnessing some tragic shit and having to deal with that. And he kept his brother's name there. And then, unfortunately, he passed away this year. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
I mean, he was only like in his mid-50s, mid to late 50s, so super young. But yeah, man, if it wasn't for Pantera, I wouldn't have listened to a lot of heavier shit. Like they were like my main 90s heavy metal band.
Did they influence you in trying to start a band?
Sure.
You said you were in a band.
Sure, yeah.
Like back then you were.
Yeah, I was in this band as Spuma, and we actually covered what was it, like Cheap Booze and a Bottle of Pills, and it was like a goofy song on Far Beyond Driven, and it starts with like a bass line and like kind of like a goofy bass line and the drums. And then I remember Dimebag's guitar part, he plays that with he was using a crushed beer can as a slide. So we would experiment with that just to like get people's attention at some shows. But yeah, man, they were a huge influence, especially for that band. I'm glad you asked that question, because the guys I was in a Spuma, they were all older than me. So they were more around your age, you
Mhm.
know, maybe like 4 or 5 years older.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they were maybe a little bit more in that Pantera direction, you know, because Pantera was definitely 90s. Like when the 2000s, I think they stopped being a band, like I said, in like '03. Don't quote me on that. So they were definitely 90s. So
Yeah.
yeah, that sound was there. That sound was definitely there. But here's some other stuff I want to move on to really quick. It's like random things about Dimebag that you might not know.
Right.
Maybe you do, maybe you don't. First thing, Dimebag's dad, Jerry Abbott, was a country and western producer and songwriter. And Dime and Vinny both spent a lot of time in the studio around their dad. And I do know that Dime's dad and maybe their uncle, like they were really influential and really heavy, like as their managers in the beginning. Because there's like that whole era of '80s Pantera, like we were talking about, like the hair metal and shit.
Right.
Like, you know, I think there might be some stuff available, like albums, like demos, but like his dad and his uncle, like really put them in the right places. And like uh, the dad would really not critique their music, but make sure they were playing with passion from like things that I've read or interviews that I've
Mhm.
watched. Like Vinny was saying, like, yeah, our dad was always there. And that's awesome. And then you could tell, you know, like if you're sitting around in the studio as a kid, that shit's going to rub off on you, right? So that's a really cool fact. So their
Yeah,
dad,
yeah,
they
yeah.
come from a musical background, and it sounds like a really strong family. Like the dad
Right.
had them set up to succeed, right?
Yeah.
Here's another weird fact. Dime originally started on drums, but Vinny excelled. So Dime's like, all right, I'll pick up a guitar now. And he did. So I guess he was like playing like Deep Purple songs and
Mhm.
shit like that, but that's how that started. He wanted to be the drummer. Didn't have him that way, but Vinny is a badass, so kind of a hard guy to copy.
Right.
But he also, this is a cool fact too. Dime received his first two guitars on the same day. So his dad gave him a Dean Standard, and it's the one that has the sunburst, like you could see it, like a sunburst kind of look to it. And with that guitar, he won his second guitar at a guitar competition, and it happened to be yet another Dean Standard. So I think he was just gonna be a Dean guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, but everyone knows that guitar. But he actually, that first one that he got, he sent it to somebody and they redid it, and it's the one that's like blue with the lightning bolts to all
Mhm.
those gear nerds out there, or you know, Dimebag enthusiasts and Pantera lovers. So you might know that, but this is the coolest thing. Moving on to this unknown fact, I think this is really awesome. I know I've mentioned it before on some other episodes, but when Dime was buried after he was murdered, Eddie Van Halen himself put his original black and yellow Bumblebee Charvel hybrid, the VH2, which was the guitar that he used on Van Halen 2, in his coffin. So Dime is buried with that.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember you ever saying that.
Yeah. I always thought that was cool. I mean, he had a lot,
Wow.
he had a
What
lot
a
of
sign of respect.
respect. I mean, if it wasn't for Eddie, you know, there would be no Dime. So for, you know, one of those things
Mhm.
like for him to do that, it's like, it's
Yeah.
chilling. Like it
Yeah,
makes my hand, you know, it makes my goosebumps. Like, man, that's some respect. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it's Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
He's the man. And that guitar too, like if you don't remember it, remember Eddie always had that white and red one with all the weird lines and stuff on it. Well,
Yes.
this was the one before that. This was the one before that, the black one with the yellow lines
Yeah,
on
yeah.
it. So, yeah, I always thought that was like the coolest thing ever. So I wanted to share that with y'all. If you didn't know, now you know. Um, what else do we have here? Uh, here's a funny thing. Uh, he was a huge fan of Kiss, and he was a part of the Kiss Army, and he loved Ace Frehley. Like I said, like he was a good blend between Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen, skill wise,
Mhm.
but he had the showmanship of Ace Frehley.
Mm.
You know, so he was a good
Liked
blend.
Kiss.
And not only that, he had an Ace Frehley tattoo on his chest, and he had Ace sign it, and then he got that signature tattooed on him. So shout out to Kiss Army, right?
Not everybody can be 100% cool.
No, I don't like Kiss at all. I mean, I appreciate them for what they are,
Yeah.
but I'm just not a fan.
Me
Just not a
neither.
fan. Here's another one. In 2003, he was presented his own School of Rock, and it was called Reefer Madness. There you go, Dimebag. Where he showed a like wide range of his different guitar styles and skills. So that's cool. So if you want to check that out, that's available probably on YouTube or something. Here's another cool one. He's a Texas dude, you know, Cowboys from Hell. They're just always Texas, Texas, Texas. So in 1999, the Dallas Stars won the Stanley Cup, and Dime and Vinny threw a party for him. And Dime is reported to putting the first dent in the Stanley Cup. I guess he drank too much or whatever, and it fell. So the dent that's on the Stanley Cup is because of Dime.
Nice.
There we go, Dimebag. But yeah, I guess they would throw some crazy parties. So that's a pretty cool metal story, ain't it?
Yeah.
Like I wish I was like the guy on the Stars that would be able to tell that. Like, man, I was with Dime and Vinny at their Pantera mansion.
Then he dropped the Stanley Cup.
And they were drinking whiskey out of that top of that or a Blacktooth Grin. We'll get into the Blacktooth. Oh, we'll just do it right now. A Blacktooth Grin is a drink that Dime started himself. If you watch those old Pantera videos, he gives you the layout for it, which is nothing really too impressive. Are you ready for this, Sretton?
Yes.
Okay, one gigantic large of Seagrin 7 whiskey, Canadian whiskey.
Okay, I'm still on board.
Combined with a second large, humongous shot of Crown Royal.
Yeah, I can still do that.
And a splash of Coke. That's the Blacktooth Grin. So, that was a big drink of ours in high school. We drank a lot of whiskey. I think we would substitute.
But you guys weren't 21.
I plead the fifth. No incriminating evidence or whatever.
That doesn't sound so bad. That drink.
It's just a lot of whiskey, dude.
Yeah.
And I guess he was ahead of the game too. I do this now, so this is a little insight for all you drinkers in your 30s. If you get those hangovers that are a little bit harder to handle compared to your 20s, Pedialyte. He was like the first dude to really smash some Pedialyte the next day. So if you don't know, now you know. Drink some Pedialyte.
Drink your Pedialyte.
Drink your Pedialyte. Here's another cool fact. Dime was with the same girl since third grade. Her name was Rita Haney, and she helped organize the Dime Bash, where his friends and family got together to celebrate the life of Dime. So that's cool.
That is cool.
Like when a dude's rich and famous and he's been with the same, woman or whatever, is the love of his life since first grade or when they were teenagers. There's something to be said behind someone's personality, I feel, especially a guy like that. So that's a really, really cool fact. What else do we have here? And here's crazy. Here we go. We were talking about a little Megadeth. Dime actually, like in between that 80s and 90s thing, like where they were hair metal and then going towards the heavier Pantera side. He tried out for Megadeth, but he told Dave Mustaine, like, me and my brother Vinny are a package deal here.
Really?
So if he can't come with me, I'm not coming at all. So Dave Mustaine was like, no thanks. So then he just stuck with Pete or with Phil and Rex, and we got Cowboys from Hell. So thanks for not going to Megadeth, because that would have been really weird. But yeah, that's it.
Would have been weird.
Would have been weird. But yeah. So there's some stuff about Dime. I love him. I love Vinny too.
Big influence on you.
Big influence. And I'll do that too. Like I'll talk about the Deftones, and you'll hear me mention Morrissey or certain stuff if you listen enough and you know what I like. But Pantera is one of those that I never want to forget, and sometimes I feel like they don't get the props that they should.
I don't think so either, but they should.
But they should, and especially Dimebag, and his guitar style, his tone, who he was as a person. He was just an awesome dude. So hopefully some of the research that I shared, might make you want to go back and jam some Pantera again, or if you never checked them out, now check them out. I really sure hope you have. If you haven't, you're really missing out. But yeah, Pantera is just a huge influence. I feel like sometimes that they're forgotten about, especially Dime. But I just wanted
to have a little Spotify playlist. Are they on Spotify?
Yeah, they're on Spotify.
Okay,
they're not like Tool. Yeah, we'll have a little playlist.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I'm going to close out with my favorite solo by Dimebag, and it's on the song "Floods." I know that this was like maybe don't quote me on this, but in the top 15. In the top 15 or top 20 best guitar solos of all time, according to Guitar World, like back in the day. So there's something to be said for that. Now, he's got awesome other guitar solos. So if you have one that you really like, let us know. Say a comment, say something. But yeah, rest in power to Dimebag and Vinny. You guys will be missed. And thank you for doing what you did to heavy metal. You changed the game. And yeah, you're the shit. So, all right. Adios. Deaf ears are sleeping.
producer my ass over there.